And now, a one-take toilet top audiobook production, as read by the Plurality Report. This series novel, The Day of the Triffids, by John Wyndham. Civilization on Earth was dead, and armies of deadly plants were waiting in the wings. The end begins. When a day that you happen to know is Wednesday starts off by sounding like Sunday, there was something seriously wrong somewhere. I felt that from the moment I woke, and yet, when I started functioning a little more smartly, I became doubtful. After all, the odds were that it was I who was wrong, and not everyone else, though I did not see how that could be. I went on waiting, tinged with doubt. But presently I had my first bit of objective evidence. A distant clock struck with what sounded to me just like 8. I listened hard and suspiciously. Soon another clock began. On a hard, decisive note, in a leisurely fashion, it gave an indisputable 8. Then I knew things were awry. The way I came to miss the end of the world, well, the end of the world I had known for close on 30 years, was sheer accident. Like a lot of survival, when you come to think of it. In the nature of things, a good many somebodies are always in hospital, and the law of average had picked on me to be one of them a week or so before. It might just as easily have been the week before that, in which case I'd not be writing now. I'd not be here at all. But chance played it not only that I should be in hospital at that particular time, but that my eyes and indeed my whole head should be wreathed in bandages, and that's why I have to be grateful to whoever orders these averages. At the time, however, I was only peevish, wondering what in thunder went on, for I had been in the place long enough to know that, next to the matron, the clock is the most sacred thing in a hospital. Without a clock, the place simply couldn't work. Each second there's someone consulting it on births, deaths, doses, meals, lights, talking, working, sleeping, resting, visiting, dressing, washing. And hitherto it had decreed that someone should begin to wash and tidy me up at exactly 3 minutes after 7 a.m. And that was one of the best reasons I had for appreciating a private room. In a public ward, the messy proceeding would have taken place a whole unnecessary hour earlier. But here, today, clocks of varying reliability were continuing to strike 8 in all directions, and still nobody had shown up. Much as I disliked the sponging process, and useless as it had been to suggest that the help of a guiding hand as far as the bathroom could eliminate it, its failure to occur was highly disconcerting. Besides, it was normally a close forerunner of breakfast, and I was feeling hungry. Probably I would have been aggrieved about it any morning, but today, this Wednesday, May 8th, was an occasion of particular personal importance. I was doubly anxious to get all the fuss and routine over because this was the day when they were going to take off my bandages. I groped around a bit to find the bell push and let them have a full 5 seconds clatter just to show what I was thinking of them. While I was waiting for the pretty, short-tempered response that such appeal ought to bring, I went on listening. The day outside, I realized now, was sounding even more wrong than I had thought. The noises it made, or failed to make, were more like Sunday than Sunday itself, and I'd come round again to being absolutely assured that it was Wednesday, whatever else had happened to it. Why the founders of St. Maron's Hospital chose to erect their institution on a main road, crossing upon a valuable office site, and thus expose their patients' nerves to constant laceration, is a foible that I never properly understood. But for those fortunate enough to be suffering from complaints unaffected by the wear and tear of continuous traffic, it did have the advantage that one could lie abed and still not be out of touch, so to speak, with the flow of life. Customarily, the westbound buses thundered along trying to beat the lights at the corner, as often as not a pig squeal of brakes and a salvo of shots from the silencer would tell that they hadn't. Then the released cross traffic would rev and roar as it started up the incline, and every now and then there would be an interlude, a good grinding bump followed by a general stoppage, exceedingly tantalizing to one in my condition, where the extent of the contretemps had to be judged entirely by the degree of profanity resulting. Certainly, neither by day nor during most of the night was there any chance of a St. Maron patient being under the impression that the common round had stopped just because he personally was on the shelf for the moment. But this morning was different, disturbingly because mysteriously different. No wheels rumbled, no buses roared, no sound of a car of any kind, in fact, was to be heard. No brakes, no horns, not even the clopping of the few rare horses that still occasionally passed, nor, as there should be at such an hour, the composite tramp of work-bound feet. The more I listened, the queerer it seemed, and then the less I cared for it. In what I reckoned to be 10 minutes of careful listening, I heard 5 sets of shuffling, hesitating footsteps, 3 voices bawling unintelligibly in the distance, and the hysterical sobs of a woman. There was not the cooing of a pigeon, not the chirp of a sparrow, nothing but the humming of wires in the wind. A nasty, empty feeling began to crawl up inside of me. It was the same sensation I used to have sometimes as a child when I got to fancying that horrors were lurking in the shadowy corners of the bedroom, when I daren't put a foot out for fear that something should reach from under the bed and grab my ankle, daren't even reach for the switch lest the movement should cause something to leap out at me. I had to fight down the feeling just as I had to when I was a kid in the dark, and it was no easier. It's surprising how much you don't grow out of when it comes to the test. The elemental fears were still marching along with me, waiting their chance, and pretty nearly getting it, just because my eyes were bandaged and the traffic had stopped. When I had pulled myself together a bit, I tried the reasonable approach. Why does traffic stop? Well, usually because the road is closed for repairs. Perfectly simple. Any time now they'd be along with pneumatic drills as another torch of aural variety for the long-suffering patients. But the trouble with the reasonable line was that it went further. It pointed out that there was not even the distant hum of traffic, not the whistle of a train, not the hoot of a tugboat, just nothing until the clocks began chiming 8:15. The temptation to take a peep, not more than a peep, of course, just enough to get some idea of what on earth could be happening, was immense, but I restrained it. For one thing, a peep was far less simple matter than it sounded. It wasn't just a case of lifting a blindfold. There were a lot of pads and bandages, but more important, I was scared to try. Over a week's complete blindness can do a lot to frighten you out of taking chances with your sight. It was true that they intended to remove the bandages today, but that would be done in special dim light, and they would allow them to stay off only if the inspection of my eyes were satisfactory. I did not know whether it would be. It might be that my sight was permanently impaired, or that I would not be able to see at all. I did not know yet. I swore, and laid hold of the bell push again. It helped to relieve my feelings a bit. No one, it seemed, was interested in bells. I began to get as much sore as worried. It's humiliating to be dependent anyway, but it's still a poorer pass to have no one to depend on. My patience was whittling down. Something, I decided, had to get done about it. If I were to bawl down the passage and generally raise hell, somebody ought to show up, if only to tell me what they thought of me. I turned back the sheet and got out of bed. I'd never seen the room I was in, and though I had a fairly good idea by ear of the position of the door, it wasn't all that easy to find. There seemed to be several puzzling and unnecessary obstacles, but I got across at the cost of a stubbed toe and minor damage to my shin. I shoved out into the passage. "Hey!" I shouted. "I want some breakfast! Room 48! For a moment, nothing happened. Then came voices, all shouting together. It sounded like hundreds of them, and not a word coming through clearly. It was as though I'd put on a record of crowd noises, and an ill-disposed crowd at that. I had a nightmarish flash, wondering whether I had been transferred to a mental home while I was sleeping, and that this was not St. Maron's Hospital at all. The sound of those voices simply didn't sound normal to me. I closed the door hurriedly on the Babel and groped my way back to the bed. At that moment, bed seemed to be the one safe, comforting thing in my whole baffling environment. As if to underline that, there came a sound which checked me in the act of pulling up the sheets. From the street below rose a scream, wildly distraught and contagiously terrifying. It came 3 times, and when it had died away, it seemed still to tingle in the air. I shuddered. I could feel the sweat prickle my forehead under the bandages. I knew now that something fearful and horrible was happening. I could not stand my isolation and helplessness any longer. I had to know what was going on around me. My hands went up to my bandages. Then, with my fingers on the safety pins, I stopped. Suppose the treatment had not been successful. Suppose that when I took the bandages off, I were to find that I still could not see. That would be worse still, 100 times worse. I lacked the courage to be alone and find out that they had not saved my sight. And even if they had, would it be safe yet to keep my eyes uncovered? I dropped my hands and lay back. I was mad at myself and the place, and I did some silly, weak cursing. Some little while must have passed before I got a proper hold on things again, but after a bit I found myself churning round in my mind once more after a possible explanation. I did not find it, but I did become absolutely convinced that, come all the paradoxes of hell, it was Wednesday, for the previous day had been notable, and I could swear that no more than a single night had passed since then. You'll find it in the records that on Tuesday, May 7th, the Earth's orbit passed through a cloud of comet debris. You can even believe it, if you like, millions did. Maybe it was so. I can't prove anything either way. I was in no state to see what happened myself. But I do have my own ideas. All that I actually know of the occasion is that I had to spend the evening in my bed listening to eyewitness accounts of what was constantly claimed to be the most remarkable celestial spectacle on record. And yet, until the thing actually began, nobody had ever heard a word about this supposed comet or its debris. Why they broadcast it, considering that everyone who could walk, hobble, or be carried was either out of doors or at windows, enjoying the greatest free firework display ever, I do not know. But they did, and it helped to impress on me still more heavily what it meant to be sightless. I got around the feeling that if the treatment had not been successful, I'd rather end the whole thing than go on that way. It was reported in the news bulletins during the day that mysterious bright green flashes had been seen in the Californian skies the previous night. However, such a lot of things did happen in California that no one could be expected to get greatly worked up over that. But as further reports came in, this comet debris motif made its appearance and it stuck. Accounts arrived from all over the Pacific of a night made brilliant by green meteors said to be sometimes in such numerous showers that the whole sky appeared to be wheeling about us. And so it was, when you come to think of it. As the nightline moved westward, the brilliance of the display was in no way decreased. Occasional green flashes became visible even before darkness fell. The announcer, given an account of the phenomenon in the 6 o'clock news, advised everyone that it was an amazing scene and one not to be missed. He mentioned also that it seemed to be interfering seriously with shortwave reception at long distances, but that the medium waves on which there would be a running commentary were unaffected, as, at present, was television. He need not have troubled with the advice. By the way everyone in the hospital got excited about it, it seemed to me that there was not the least likelihood of anybody missing it. Well, except myself. And as if the radio's comments were not enough, the nurse who brought me my supper had to tell me about it. "The sky's simply full of shooting stars," she said. All bright green. They make people's faces look frightfully ghastly. Everybody's out watching them, and sometimes it's almost as light as day, only all the wrong colour. Even now and then there's a big one so bright that it hurts to look at it. It's a marvellous sight. They say there's never been anything like it before. It is such a pity you can't see it, isn't it? It is, I agreed somewhat shortly. We've drawn back the curtains in the wards so that they can all see it, she went on. If only you hadn't those bandages on, you'd have a wonderful view of it from here. Oh, I said. But it must be better still outside there. They say thousands of people are out in the parks and on the heath watching it all, and on all the flat roofs you can see people standing and looking up. How long do they expect it to go on? I asked patiently. I don't know, but they say it's not so bright now as it was in the other places. Still, even if you'd had your bandages off today, I don't expect they'd let you watch it. You'll have to take things gently at first, and some of the flashes are very bright. Ooh. Why, ooh? I inquired. That was such a brilliant one then. It made the whole room look green. What a pity you can't see it. Isn't it? I agreed. Now do go away. Yeah, there's a good girl. I tried listening to the radio, but it was making the same oohs and ahs, helped out by gentlemanly tones which blathered out this magnificent spectacle and unique phenomenon until I began to feel that there was a parry for all the world going on with me as the only person not invited. I didn't have any choice of entertainment, for the hospital radio system gave only one program, take it or leave it. After a bit, I gathered that the show had begun to wane. The announcer advised everyone who had not yet seen it to hurry up and do so, or regret all his life that he had missed it. The general idea seemed to be to convince me that I was passing up the very thing I was born for. In the end, I got sick of it and switched off. The last thing I heard was that the display was diminishing fast now, and that we'd probably be out of the debris area in a few hours. There could be no doubt in my mind that all this had taken place the previous evening. For one thing, I should have been a great deal hungrier even than I was had it been longer ago. Very well. What was this, then? Had the whole hospital, the whole city, made such a night of it that they'd not pulled around yet? About which point I was interrupted as the chorus of clocks, near and far, started announcing 9. For the third time I played hell with the bell. As I lay waiting, I could hear a sort of murmurousness beyond the door. It seemed composed of whimperings, slitherings, and shufflings, punctuated occasionally by a raised voice in the distance. But still no one came to my room. By this time I was slipping back once more. The nasty, childish fancies were on me again. I found myself waiting for the unseeable door to open and horrible things to come padding in. In fact, I wasn't perfectly sure that somebody or something wasn't in already and stealthily prowling round the room. Not that I'm given to that kind of thing, really. It was those damned bandages over my eyes, the medley of voices that had shouted back at me down the corridor. But I certainly was getting the willies, and once you get 'em, they grow. Already they were past the stage where you can shoo them off by whistling or singing at yourself. It came at last to the straight question. Was I more scared of endangering my sight by taking off the bandages, or of staying in the dark with the willies growing every minute? If it had been a day or two earlier, I don't know what I'd have done. Very likely in the same end. But this day I could at least tell myself. Well, hang it. There can't be a lot of harm if I use common sense. After all, the bandages are due to come off today. I'll risk it. There's one thing to put to my credit. I was not far enough gone to tear them off wildly. I had the sense and the self-control to get out of bed and pull the shade down before I started on the safety pins. Once I had the coverings off and had found out that I could see in the dimness, I felt a relief that I'd never known before. Nevertheless, the first thing I did after assuring myself that there were indeed no malicious persons or things lurking under the bed or elsewhere was to slip a chair back under the door handle. I could and did begin to get a better grip on myself then. I made myself take a full hour, gradually getting used to full daylight. At the end of it, I knew that thanks to swift first aid, followed by good doctoring, my eyes were as good as ever. But still, no one came. On the lower shelf of the bedside table, I discovered a pair of dark glasses, thoughtfully put ready against a need of them. Cautiously, I put them on before I went right close to the window. The lower pan of it was not made to open, so that the view was restricted. Squinting down and sideways, I could see one or two people who appeared to be wandering in an odd, kind of aimless way farther up the street. But what struck me most, and at once, was the sharpness, the clear definition of everything, even the distant housetops' view across the opposite roofs. And then I noticed that no chimney, large or small, was smoking. I found my clothes hung tidily in a cupboard. I began to feel more normal once I had them on. There were some cigarettes still in the case. I lit one and began to get into the state of mind where, though everything was still undeniably queer, I could no longer understand why I had been quite so near panic. It is not easy to think oneself back to the outlook of those days. We have to be more self-reliant now, but then there was so much more routine. Things were so interlinked. Each one of us so steadily did his little part in the right place that it was easy to mistake habit and custom for the natural law, and all the more disturbing, therefore, when the routine was in any way upset. When almost half a lifetime has been spent in one conception of order, reorientation is no 5-minute business. Looking back at the shape of things then, the amount we did not know and did not care to know about our daily lives is not only astonishing, but somehow a bit shocking. I knew practically nothing, for instance, of such ordinary things as how my food reached me, where the fresh water came from, how the clothes I wore were woven and made, how the drainage of cities kept them healthy. Our life had become a complexity of specialists, all attending to their own jobs with more or less efficiency and expecting others to do the same. That made it incredible to me, therefore, that complete disorganization could have overtaken the hospital. Somebody, somewhere, I was sure, must have it in hand. Unfortunately, it was a somebody who had forgotten all about room 48. Nevertheless, when I did go to the door again and peer into the corridor, I was forced to realize that, whatever bad had happened, it was affecting a great deal more than a single inhabitant of room 48. Just then, there was no one in sight, though in the distance I could hear a pervasive murmur of voices. There was a sound of shuffling footsteps, too, and occasionally a louder voice echoing hollowly in the corridors, but nothing like the din I had shut out before. This time I did not shout. I stepped out cautiously. Why cautiously? I don't know. There was just something that induced it. It was difficult in that reverberating building to tell where the sounds were coming from, but one way the passage finished at an obscured French window, with the shadow of a balcony rail upon it, so I went to the other. Rounding a corner, I found myself out of the private room wing and on a broader corridor. At the far end of the wide corridor were the doors of a ward. The panels were frosted, save for ovals of clear glass at face level, and I opened the door. It was pretty dark in there. The curtains had evidently been drawn after the previous night's display was over, and they were still drawn. "Sister?" I inquired.
"Jane
a man's voice said.
What's more,"
It went on,
"she ain't been here for ruddy hours neither. Can't you pull them ruddy curtains, mate, and let's have some flippin' light? Don't know what's come over a bloody place this morning."
"Okay," I agreed. Even if the whole place were disorganized, it didn't seem to be any good reason why the unfortunate patients should have to lie in the dark. I pulled back the curtains on the nearest window and let in a shaft of bright sunlight. It was a surgical ward with about 20 patients. All bedridden, leg injuries mostly, several amputations by the look of it.
Stop fooling about with them, mate, and put them back,
said the same voice. I turned and looked at the man who spoke. He was a dark, burly fellow with a weather-beaten skin. He was sitting up in bed facing directly at me, and at the light. His eyes seemed to be gazing into my own, and so did his neighbor's and the next man's. For a few moments I stared back at them. It took that long to register. Then,
they seem to be stuck,
I said. I'll find someone to see to them. And with that I fled from the ward. I was shaky again, and I could have done with a stiff drink. The thing was beginning to sink in, but I found it difficult to believe that all the men in that ward could be blind. And yet... The elevator wasn't working, so I started down the stairs. On the next floor I pulled myself together and plucked up the courage to look into another ward. The beds there were all disarranged. At first I thought the place was empty, but it wasn't. Not quite. 2 men in nightclothes lay on the floor. One was soaked in blood from an unhealed incision. The other looked as if some kind of congestion had seized him. They were both quite dead. The rest had gone. Back on the stairs once more, I realized that most of the background voices I had been hearing all the time were coming up from below, and that they were louder and closer now. I hesitated a moment, but there seemed to be nothing for it but to go on making my way down. On the next turn, I nearly tripped over a man who lay across my way in the shadow. At the bottom of the flight lay somebody who actually had tripped over him and cracked his head on the stone steps as he landed. At last I reached the final turn where I could stand and look down into the main hall. Seemingly everyone in the place who was able to move must have made instinctively for that spot, either with the idea of finding help or getting outside. Maybe some of them had got out. One of the main entrance doors was wide open, but most of them couldn't find it. There was a tight-packed mob of men and women, nearly all of them in their hospital nightclothes, milling slowly and helplessly around. The motion pressed those on the outskirts cruelly against marble corners or ornamental projections. Some of them were crushed breathlessly against the walls. Now and then one would trip. If the press of bodies allowed him to fall, there was little chance that it would let him get up again. The place looked, well, maybe you'll have seen some of Dore's pictures of sinners in hell, but Dore couldn't include the sounds, the sobbing, the murmurous moaning, and occasionally a forlorn cry. A minute or two of it was all I could stand. I fled back up the stairs. There was the feeling that I ought to do something about it, lead them out into the street perhaps, and at least put an end to that dreadful slow milling. But a glance had been enough to show that I could not hope to make my way to the door to guide them there. Besides, if I did get them outside, what then? I sat down on a step for a while to get over it, with my head in my hands and that awful conglomerate sound in my ears all the time. Then I searched for and found another staircase. It was a narrow service flight which led me out by a back way into the yard. Maybe I'm not telling this part too well. The whole thing was so unexpected and shocking that for a time I deliberately tried not to remember the details. Just then I was feeling much as though it were a nightmare from which I was desperately but vainly seeking the relief of waking myself. As I stepped out into the yard, I still half refused to believe what I had seen. But one thing I was perfectly certain about: reality or nightmare, I needed a drink as I had seldom needed one before. There was nobody in sight in the little side street outside the yard gates, but almost opposite stood a pub. I can recall its name now. The Alamine Arms. There was a board bearing a reputed likeness of Viscount Montgomery hanging from an iron bracket, and below it one of the doors stood open. I made straight for it. Stepping into the public bar gave me for the moment a comforting sense of normality. It was prosaically and familiarly like dozens of others. But although there was no one in that part, there was certainly something going on in the saloon bar around the corner. I heard heavy breathing. A cork left its bottle with a pop. A pause. Then a voice remarked,
"Gin, blast it! To hell with gin!"
There followed a shattering crash. The voice gave a sozzled chuckle.
"That's the mirror. What's good of mirrors anyway?"
Another cork popped.
"Strong gin again,"
complained the voice, offended.
"To hell with gin!"
This time the bottle hit something soft, thudded to the floor, and lay there gurgling away its contents. "Hey!" I called. "I want a drink." There was a silence then.
"Who are you?"
the voice inquired cautiously. "I'm from the hospital," I said. "I want a drink." "Don't remember your voice. Can you see?" "Oh."
"Don't remember your voice. Can you see?"
"Yes," I told him.
"Well then, for God's sake, get over to the bar, Doc, and find me a bottle of whiskey."
"I'm doctor enough for that," I said. I climbed across and went round the corner. A large-bellied, red-faced man with a graying walrus mustache stood there clad only in trousers and a collarless shirt. He was pretty drunk. He seemed undecided whether to open the bottle he held in his hand or to use it as a weapon.
"If you're not a doctor, what are you?"
he demanded suspiciously. "I was a patient, but I need a drink as much as any doctor," I said.
That's gin again you got.
That's gin again you got there," I added.
"Oh, is it? Damn gin,"
he said and slung it away. It went through the window with a lively crash. "Give me that corkscrew," I told him. I took down a bottle of whiskey from the shelf, opened it, and handed it to him with a glass. For myself, I chose a stiff brandy with very little soda, and then another. After that, my hand wasn't shaking so much. I looked at my companion. He was taking his whiskey neat out of the bottle. "You'll get drunk," I said. He paused and turned his head toward me. I could have sworn that his eyes really saw me.
"Get drunk, damn it. I am drunk,"
he said scornfully. He was so perfectly right that I didn't comment. He brooded a moment before he announced,
"Gotta get drunker. Gotta get much drunker."
He leaned close.
"Do you know what? I'm blind. That's why I am blind as a bat. Everybody's blind as a bat. Except you. Why aren't you blind as a bat?"
"I don't know," I told him.
"It's that bloody comet. That's what done it. Green shooting stars, and now everyone's blind as a bat. Did you see green shooting stars?"
"No," I admitted.
"Well, there you are. Proves it. You didn't see them, you're blind. Everyone else saw them."
He waved an expressive arm.
"All's blind as bats. Bloody comets, I say."
I poured myself a third brandy, wondering whether there might not be something in what he was saying. "Everyone blind?" I repeated.
"That's it. All of them. Probably everyone in the world. Except you,"
he added as an afterthought. "How do you know?" I asked.
"Caesar, listen,"
he said. We stood side by side, leaning on the bar of the dingy pub, and listened. There was nothing to be heard, nothing but the rustle of a dirty newspaper blown down the empty street. Such a quietness held everything as cannot have been known in those parts for 1,000 years and more.
"See what I mean? It's obvious,"
said the man. "Yes," I said slowly. "Yes, I see what you mean." I decided that I must get along. I did not know where to, but I must find out more about what's happening. "Are you the landlord?" I asked him.
"Wolf I am,"
he demanded defensively. "Only that I've got to pay someone for 3 double brandies."
Forget it."
"But look here."
"Forget it, I tell you. Do you know why? 'Cause what's good's of money to a dead man? And that's what I am as good as. Just a few more drinks and that's it."
He looked a pretty robust specimen for his age, and I said so.
"But what's good living blind as a bat?" he demanded aggressively. "That's what my wife said, and she was right. Only she's more guts than I have. When she found as the kids was blind too, what did she do? Took 'em into her bed with her and turned on the gas. That's what she done. And I hadn't the guts to stick with 'em. She got plucked, my wife, more than I have. But I will have soon. I'm going back up there soon. When I'm drunk enough."
What was there to say? What I did say served no purpose, save to spoil his temper. In the end, he groped his way to the stairs and disappeared up them, bottle in hand. I didn't try to stop him or follow him. I watched him go. Then I knocked off the last of my brandy and went out into the silent street.